don't park. And we're walking along, and all of a sudden I notice that there are these tall trees on this side of the campus. Now, as I said, normally the psychology building is on the new side of the campus, not the old side of the campus. My lab was off the campus, so I'm not in this part of the university. So I said, Christopher, I said, look, there are tall trees here. Christopher says, they're not my trees. Now, Christopher, by the way, very often would reject information that I thought might fit, because he's not just sort of grabbing, trying to get accepted information. It's got to meet his sort of standards of being a detective. So we walk along, there are more trees, and finally we hit this area which is like a park, literally grass, lots of shade, and so on, which is the entrance to the old part of the campus. And he says, this looks like my London park. And the street that was closed off, I didn't realize this, was actually called Park Avenue or something like that, which is very amusing. So I said, a London-like park. Now, they're doing construction here, and they're running water, apparently, because they're cleaning the streets or whatever, and there's this stream of water that we literally have to cross over to get to the museum. So we cross over the stream. I note the stream. We walk up to the Arizona State Museum building, and it's closed. We can't even go in.
No.
The experiment is now over. 1/2 hour. It's 9:30 in the morning. We're done. Now I'm in shock. I'm totally in shock. What's the probability of that? That his dream in June? Would he then get details that relates to London parks and greenness and running water? So we're now walking back to the hotel. He's, of course, thrilled because now he's going to spend the time at the hotel pool, which, of course, doesn't really count because, he knew the dream said he was going to be at the pool and he's going to pick me at the pool and so on and so forth. But we're walking back. I'm in shock now. And then he looks up and he says, Gary, look at that building up there. And there is literally the university's Army ROTC building.
Wow.
He's gotten every detail correct.
Now, he had these dreams before he even came over to this country, right? He started.
That's correct. Especially the dream about the knowing that the 10th day was going to end early. At the earliest, yes, that was in June. Before I'd even picked the sites.
Right.
Well, we had scheduled when he was going to show up.
There are billions of people out there who know that the future is always in motion, and yet they get feelings, they get visions, impressions, and
yes.
Some even claim they get guidance from other worldly sources like higher guides or even the deceased, like Christopher says, that helps them negotiate this future. Are you convinced now that they can actually see the future?
Well, here's what I'm convinced of, first of all. I'm convinced that Christopher could do this. Remember, I'm a scientist. I'm very conservative. I have to see data, and I have to see it replicated before I come to any firm conclusions. Now, Christopher, of course, is, quote, an outlier. I mean, on a bell-shaped curve, he's on the far end of somebody who's devoted his life to doing this kind of thing.
Yep, I agree with that.
So he's going to do this better than most. So the conclusion I've come to is, yes, Christopher can do this. And Christopher, who's more experienced than virtually anyone on the planet in doing this, as far as I know, is convinced, after years of doing this, that the information is being given to him by intelligent processes. That it's not that he's, quote, grabbing it, taking it out of a data bank. And the evidence from the 10-day experiment was more consistent with his hypothesis than the more conservative or the simple one, which is that there's like an Akashic record or just a place where future possibilities are stored in the quantum vacuum of space or whatever, and somehow our consciousness just goes in and plucks out a potential, quantum potential, and then realizes it. That it seems to be more complicated than that. Having said that, I have worked with a number of other people who have precognitive events in dreams or in waking, which, so I know it's not unique to Christopher. It's just that I haven't done formal experiments with most of these people.
Sure.
It's just witnessing it. And what Christopher's convinced of is that any of us can do this to various degrees.
Well, now let's make a distinction between let's call them states of consciousness. There are the conscious and then the unconscious. So well, first of all, help us understand these definitions, and then I'll go on with my question.
Sure. Well, typically what we mean by conscious is the things that we can be aware of, that we can report, that we can either sense with our conventional senses or that we can intuit. And what we call the unconscious is information that are the things that we're not aware of, that we don't have any typically sensory awareness of, but nonetheless can influence and direct our consciousness. And for me, the way I try to remember this is that take the optic system and the nature of photons. Our eyes are finely tuned to see a sliver of the spectrum of photons, what we call the visible range. We don't see infrared, we don't see ultraviolet, and we don't see all the frequencies that are on either side of it. We're, quote, unconscious of most of the actual light that's present in the electromagnetic spectra. We just see the little bit that we experience as the millions of colors that we can see, but we're unaware of these other vaster amounts of frequencies of light. But those frequencies can nonetheless influence our consciousness. Matter of fact, they can even affect what we see, but we can't directly see it. So that's a simple way of thinking about, quote, conscious and unconscious.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about that? Yeah. In a sense, I'm trying to get to this point. There's, let's call him the hypothetical unconscious dreamer for whom the universe has revealed a picture of his future, a small one. He dreams that the company he works for is going to close for good in 60 days. However, the managers just had a big annual Christmas party and told everyone things were never better. But right as rain, the company closes. He is now out of work and destitute because he didn't act on his dream. He didn't save up some money, didn't put away a little rainy day, didn't put out any resumes. So how to utilize the information provided him by the universe? Well, like most people do, they just kind of unconsciously blow it off and go, wow, I had a feeling, a couple months ago this was going to happen, and then it happened. But, does he become convinced that he can actually see the future and that dreams are important? I don't know. But I'm trying to make a point here. He has observed something that should be impossible if the universe was just all chaos and entropy. And
that's right.
And so,